Dubai is one of the most ambitious experiments ever attempted on a city scale, so improbable it can feel almost fictional. In just a few decades, it vaulted from a quiet coastal settlement into a place that competes with global giants, record-breaking towers, engineered coastlines, and a financial ecosystem built to attract capital from everywhere. But the skyline and infrastructure are the outcome, not the origin. Behind the transformation sits a ruling family known for relentless focus and unusually disciplined execution, the Maktoums. To understand how that happened, you have to go back to a time before Dubai was even a name that mattered. Before the 1800s, the area that would become Dubai is essentially a small shoreline community at the edge of an immense desert. Life is defined by the basics: heat, salt air, and the narrow margin between survival and scarcity. People live in simple shelters made from palm fronds and mud. Food comes from dates, fish, and whatever the sea allows. Pearls exist, but for most families, pearls are not a guarantee of prosperity. They're a gamble. Farther south, in the Liwa Oasis, the Bani Yas tribe holds influence over a loose confederation of settlements. Water and mobility are everything. Wells keep families alive. Camels move people and goods across the dunes. Power depends less on formal institutions and more on relationships, alliances that can shift quickly between branches of the same extended tribal network. Within the Bani Yas, two key branches matter for this story. The Al Bufala branch rules Abu Dhabi. The Al Bufalsa branch, closely related, will eventually become the ruling line of Dubai. In those years, cohesion inside the tribe is fragile. A leader doesn't hold authority because of a crown or a bureaucracy. Authority is maintained because people choose to follow, and because rivals calculate that challenging the leader could cost them everything. For a period, the tribal coalition is held together by a cautious but respected figure, Sheikh Tahnoun bin Shakhbut al-Nahyan. His approach is pragmatic: keep the peace, contain rivalries, and prevent internal fractures from turning into open conflict. But when he dies in 1833, stability becomes vulnerable. Power passes to his brother, Khalifa bin Shakhbut, ambitious, determined, and deeply aware that leadership can be lost as easily as it can be gained. Almost immediately, suspicion spreads. Some believe Khalifa intends to remove challengers before they can organize. Others fear that cousins and brothers are preparing to replace him. In a desert political environment, rumors don't stay rumors for long. They become catalysts. Leadership at that time is not secured by paperwork. It is secured by loyalty, leverage, and the credible fear that opposition will be punished. The moment Khalifa takes the top position, every close relative becomes a potential alternative center of power. Then comes an event that breaks the balance. Late in 1833, Khalifa hosts what appears to be a major wedding feast in Liwa, publicly framed as a celebration and a gesture of unity between the branches and elders. The setting is ceremonial. The message is reconciliation. But as the gathering reaches its peak, the tone shifts. A command is given. Weapons are drawn. What should have been a political reset turns into violence inside the tents. Men connected to the Al Bufalasa branch are attacked and killed in the chaos. The event tears through the tribe's internal trust. A gathering meant to symbolize unity ends as a turning point that makes unity impossible. After the massacre, the tribe is fractured, emotionally, politically, and practically. Many in the Al Bufalasa branch lose family, security, and any belief that they can safely remain under the leadership in Abu Dhabi. And rather than accept the new order, two cousins decide they will not live as subordinates in a system they no longer trust. Their names are Obaid bin Saeed and Maktoum bin Butti. They gather a few hundred followers, prepare what they can carry, and move north, crossing dunes for weeks toward the coast. The journey is harsh, but the destination offers something the oasis cannot: access to maritime trade and opening to the world beyond the desert. Eventually, they reach a small creek that cuts into the shoreline and opens to the Gulf. Along its banks sits a modest settlement, fishermen, pearl divers, a handful of huts. Not a city, not a market center, just a place. But Obaid and Maktoum see potential. The creek can shelter boats. Trade routes bring merchants moving between Oman, India, Persia, and the broader region. And crucially, this location offers room to govern themselves without immediate interference. They establish homes, dig wells, and begin welcoming traders. Slowly, the settlement gains an identity, and people start calling it Dubai. Yet, even as Dubai takes shape, the region is being pulled into the orbit of a far larger power, Britain, operating through the British East India Company. In the early 1800s, Britain's priority in the Gulf is not local politics, it's sea lanes. The empire wants secure routes to and from India, and it is willing to impose order on coastal rulers to achieve it. The Gulf coastline is dotted with ports and rival sheikdoms, and maritime conflict is common. Britain responds the way empires often do, with force and then with treaties. In 1819, a British force sailing from India attacks Ras Al Khaimah, destroying ships and fortifications and crushing the Qawasim fleet, one of the dominant maritime powers in the region at the time. The point is unmistakable. Britain will not tolerate threats to shipping. Defiance will be met decisively. For Dubai's early leadership, the lesson is straightforward. A small port cannot survive by challenging a global empire. It survives by understanding the balance of power and positioning itself accordingly. In 1820, regional rulers signed the General Maritime Treaty, establishing rules meant to end maritime attacks and secure trade routes. The treaty also gives Britain major influence over external relations. For Dubai, though, it brings something valuable: predictability. Under a British-backed order, ships can move with less risk, and merchants looking for stability become more willing to anchor their business in a quiet harbor. Dubai's rulers keep their governance simple and practical, resolve disputes quickly, keep taxes modest, protect trade, avoid unnecessary conflict. Over time, Dubai becomes a small but dependable port, still reliant on pearling and fishing, but increasingly tied to regional commerce. By the late 1800s, however, Dubai faces a problem shared by many places built on older trade patterns: competition. Wealth flows toward rising ports elsewhere, and the existing model no longer feels like enough. Dubai needs an edge, something that makes merchants choose it over better established hubs. That shift begins with a ruler who understands that the fastest way to grow a port is to make trade effortless. His name is Sheikh Maktoum bin Hasher al Maktoum. Born around 1878, he grows up inside a family already shaping Dubai's early direction. He is the grandson of Maktoum bin Buti, the founding figure of the ruling line. From an early age, he watches boats arrive at the creek carrying goods and stories from India, Persia, and East Africa. Unlike others who see shipping as routine, he pays attention to the mechanics: tariffs, profit margins, routes, and the quiet decisions that determine where merchants prefer to dock. When he comes to power near the end of the 19th century, Dubai is still small and relatively poor compared to places like Bahrain and Linga. Maktoum sees the reality clearly. Dubai's path to survival runs through trade. Without scale in agriculture or industry, commerce is the lifeline. There is a moment that crystallizes his thinking. He notices ships bypassing Dubai, choosing other ports with lower fees and easier terms. To him, this isn't just lost revenue, it's lost future. So he makes a move that is simple in concept and radical in impact. He removes trade taxes. In 1894, Sheikh Maktoum issues a decree abolishing customs duties. It's a direct invitation to merchants across the region. Come here, do business, and keep more of what you earned. Traders, especially Persians facing heavier taxation elsewhere, begin arriving in greater numbers. Dubai becomes known as a place with low barriers, operational freedom, and a leadership structure that prioritizes commerce. Markets grow in Dera and Bur Dubai. The creek fills with cargo boats. A small settlement starts behaving like a true trading hub. As trade accelerates, Dubai's identity begins to change. More shops appear. More homes rise from sand and stone. The town becomes louder, denser, and more outward-looking. It feels less like a coastal outpost and more like a place with momentum. Among the most influential arrivals are merchants from Bastak in southern Persia, experienced traders, builders, and craftsmen seeking stability and better terms. Sheikh Maktoum gives them space along the southern bank of the creek. They build distinctive wind tower homes and compact streets, forming what becomes known as Al-Bastakia, bringing Persian architecture, broader trade networks, and fresh capital directly into Dubai's growing core. And this is where the early blueprint becomes visible. A small ruler, in a small place, makes the cost of doing business low, the rules predictable, and the welcome real. Then lets trade do what trade always does when friction drops. It multiplies. Trade and migration had already started to reshape Dubai, but the next surge of prosperity came from the water itself. Pearls, pulled from the Gulf long before oil or skyscrapers ever entered the picture. In the late 1800s, what began as small-scale diving gradually turned into an entire economic system. The Gulf's warm, shallow waters were well suited to pearl oysters, and diving evolved from seasonal work into a full-time way of life for thousands. Each summer, fleets of wooden boats pushed out from Dubai Creek. Every vessel carried a small, tightly coordinated team: divers, rope handlers, and merchants who financed the voyages and traded the catch. The work was punishing. Divers relied on simple tools: a nose clip, a weight to descend quickly, and a basket to collect oysters. They would drop beneath the surface again and again, holding their breath close to a minute at a time, repeating the cycle from morning until evening. By the early 1900s, pearling wasn't just important. It was the engine of Dubai's economy, responsible for much of its income and employment. The creek grew louder, busier, and wealthier as pearls moved through its markets into global trade routes. But this kind of prosperity had a hidden weakness. It depended on one product staying rare. And then scarcity was broken by technology far from the Gulf. In the early 20th century, a Japanese innovator named Kokichi Mikimoto began experimenting with ways to produce pearls on demand. The idea was deceptively simple: insert a small bead and a piece of oyster tissue into a live oyster, then allow nature to do the rest. Over time, the oyster would coat the bead in nacre, forming a pearl that looked nearly indistinguishable from a natural one. The process took time, but the results were consistent and, crucially, cheaper. By around 1916, Japan was producing cultured pearls at scale, offering a product that visually competed with natural pearls for a fraction of the price. Once these pearls reached global markets, buyers in trading hubs, places like Bombay and Paris, had little reason to pay premium prices for the natural version. The impact was fast and severe. Natural pearl prices plunged. A trade that had supported Gulf communities for generations began to collapse. In Dubai, the shock hit directly. Fewer buyers, fewer voyages, fewer incomes. Boats stayed tied up. Divers lost work. Families who had built their lives around the industry slipped into debt. Pearls that once symbolized status and security ended up sitting unsold, stored away instead of traded. It's almost unsettling how quickly it happened, how one innovation, one new method, could undercut an entire regional economy that had taken centuries to form. A city that had floated on pearl wealth suddenly found itself searching for a new direction. An economic collapse rarely stays purely economic. As the pearling industry disintegrated, Dubai's social and political tensions rose. Markets quieted, revenues fell, and even the ruling household's resources tightened. Merchant families, many of them influential and closely tied to Dubai's commercial life, began demanding a different approach. A group of powerful merchants gathered and pushed for a Majlis, a council that would help guide decisions on spending, trade policy, and taxation. Initially, the idea looked like reform rather than revolt. Sheikh Saeed agreed to allow the council to form. Meetings took place. Proposals were debated. For a brief moment, Dubai appeared to be stepping into a new phase, one where governance might become more consultative, shaped as much by commercial logic as by tradition. But the balance didn't hold. As the council gained confidence, it began pressing into areas that directly touched sovereign power, control of revenues, contracts, and decision-making authority. Rumors spread that the goal wasn't just advice, but constraint, limiting the ruler's power itself. In a system where legitimacy depended on authority being clear and enforceable, that was an existential challenge. By late 1938, the city hardened into opposing camps. Sheikh Saeed and loyal tribal supporters held Dubai. Reformists consolidated in Dera across the creek. The creek, Dubai's lifeline of commerce, became a physical and symbolic dividing line. Then a moment meant to signal unity became a breaking point. In March 1939, during the wedding of Sheikh Rashid bin Saeed Al Maktoum, a ceremony intended to project reconciliation, violence erupted. In the aftermath, the council's leading figure, Hashr bin Rashid, was killed along with close allies. By the next morning, the reform movement was effectively finished. The Majlis was dissolved. Key figures were removed from the scene through exile, punishment, or elimination. Sheikh Saeed retained power, backed not only by force on the ground, but by British approval, which mattered deeply in that era's regional order. The 1930s and 1940s remained difficult years. The pearl trade had collapsed, and Dubai had not yet found a replacement engine. Meanwhile, neighboring parts of the Gulf were entering a new age, oil. Bahrain struck oil in 1932. Kuwait followed in 1938. Saudi Arabia also discovered major deposits in 1938. Across the region, petroleum began to redefine what wealth looked like and what a future could be built on. Dubai tried to join that wave. In 1937, Dubai signed its first oil concession with Petroleum Concessions Limited, linked to the Anglo-Persian Oil Company. The agreement granted exploration rights across the emirate in exchange for payments to the ruler. Engineers arrived with surveying tools, maps, equipment, and a promise that the city might finally catch up to its booming neighbors. But geology refused. Test drilling around areas like Jebel Ali and Margam produced no commercial oil, only water and disappointment. By the mid-1940s, the regional oil rush had moved on. Bahrain, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia were transforming rapidly, while Dubai remained reliant on trade, fishing, and the basics. Yet paradoxically, this failure may have forced Dubai toward a different kind of future, one built less on a single natural resource and more on strategy. That future would be shaped by a new leader. Sheikh Rashid bin Saeed Al Maktoum was born in 1912, son of Sheikh Saeed. He grew up watching Dubai's traders, listening to stories of the Pearl Era, and learning how commerce actually worked, not from theory, but from the rhythm of the creek and the bargaining of merchants. He was known as quiet, deliberate, and attentive. A formal study mattered, but his real education came from the market, who moved goods, who controlled credit, and what decisions made a port thrive or fade. As his father's health weakened in the late 1930s, Rashid gradually took on more responsibility. He advised on trade, mediated disputes, and built working relationships with both merchants and British officials. When Sheikh Saeed died in 1958, Rashid took power without theatrics, but with clear direction. He inherited a city that lacked oil wealth and one that still carried scars from economic collapse. But it also had something valuable: location, commercial instincts, and a population that understood trade. By the late 1950s, Rashid faced an urgent practical threat. Dubai Creek, the heart of the trading system, was silting up. Larger vessels could no longer enter reliably. Merchants warned that if the creek became unusable, Dubai's commercial advantage could vanish. Ships would unload elsewhere, Bahrain, Kuwait, leaving Dubai behind. Rashid's conclusion was blunt: either act decisively or risk a slow decline. And he chose the bold option, because if Dubai was going to survive without oil, it would have to manufacture its own advantage. Our description and analysis about Dubai and its history will continue in the part 2 of this video. Do not miss it. In the meantime, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and feel free to leave a comment.